Hey guys! Tonight we delve into the swirling silk halls of an ancient palace, where incense curls through moonlit colonnades and the air hums with harp music and whispered secrets. You're seated cross-legged on a plush violet cushion, date sweetness on your tongue, as the royal feast stretches before you. Candles flicker in towering brass holders, shadows dancing across the carved marble walls. It's warm here, almost too warm, the heat of countless clay braziers pressing against your skin. You glance around the banquet, fat roasted lambs stuffed with saffron rice, figs glazed in honey, pomegranates split open like bleeding jewels. Everywhere, courtiers lean in conspiratorially, fluttering fans carved from ivory and peacock feathers, perfume drifting in invisible ribbons. You shift, your thighs prickled by the embroidery beneath them, when suddenly 3 young women catch your gaze. They sit together near a column draped with rose garlands, speaking in hushed tones over bowls of pistachios and candied lemons. The eldest wears deep emerald robes and a circlet of turquoise at her brow, her voice low and deliberate. Beside her, the middle sister laughs softly, adorned in golden silk with a sash that pools around her bare ankles. And the youngest? Well, her beauty has a bite to it, like biting into mint after hot tea. She wears only a simple linen shift, unadorned save for her hair cascading down her back in a dark river. You nibble an almond as their conversation sharpens, their voices slicing through the banquet's drone. A lute player plucks a languorous melody nearby, but you barely hear it, because the eldest sister is leaning in, whispering her secret dream. "Imagine," she says, eyes glinting, "marrying the royal baker. I would wake each dawn to the scent of warm bread, my children fed with cakes and honey, my hands forever scented with cardamom and clove." The middle sister sighs, propping her chin in her palm. "That is nothing," she murmurs, a smile playing at her lips. "If I could marry the Sultan's cook, I would dine each night upon stuffed quail, lamb with coriander, delicate sweets dipped in rosewater. My children would know only luxury." The youngest watches them both, silent for a moment. Her gaze is calm but sharp, like cool water that hides jagged river stones below. "Finally," she says, "you are both foolish." She flicks a pistachio shell into an empty dish. "If I married the Sultan himself, I would bear him sons with golden hair and pearl teeth. The entire kingdom would bow before my children." A hush falls between them as the lute ends on a silvery note. You glance around, wondering if anyone else heard. Probably not. Everyone is too busy devouring honey dates or retelling last week's scandal about the vizier's missing ruby. Still, a shiver runs down your spine. The youngest sister's words hang in the heavy air like a falcon poised to strike. You adjust your position, feeling your foot fall asleep, pins and needles sparking along your calf. But then, something shifts in the room. A presence moves behind a silk curtain near the sisters. You can almost hear a suppressed breath, see a flicker of movement, because what they don't know is that the Sultan himself is there tonight, hidden from sight behind the embroidered screen. He watches them through its mesh of golden threads, his black beard braided and oiled, his robes heavy with amethyst clasps. His dark eyes glimmer as he listens to their secret dreams, unseen but hearing every word. Historians still argue whether this feast took place during Ramadan festivities or a royal birthday banquet, because medieval records conflict depending on which storyteller you ask. Some say the 3 sisters were daughters of a cloth merchant. Others claim they were orphaned girls raised within the palace kitchen itself. But here, in this scented hall, details blur like incense smoke curling into the vaulted ceiling. You are left only with what you hear and see. 3 women laying out their secret futures on a platter no less tempting than the roasted lamb before you. And if you think this is just a sweet little story of dreams and marriage, you probably won't survive what happens next. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your gaze shifts back to the sisters. The eldest brushes crumbs from her lap. The middle one dabs honey from her lip with a silken cloth. And the youngest, she simply sits, eyes dark and steady, already planning a future that will bend the world to her will. You remain perched on your cushion, the embroidered patterns pressing into your skin as the feast winds down into sleepy harp music and the tang of mint tea rising from brass cups. The candles burn low, flickering shadows across the marbled columns. Around you, guests begin to drift away in pairs and clusters, their sandals whispering against the stone floors, the scent of rosewater lingering in their wake. But your eyes stay fixed on the eldest sister. She sits straighter now, almost regal in her emerald robes as she lifts a fig to her lips, her mind lost in visions of golden crusts and sweetly charred flatbreads. You watch her fingers, adorned with glass beads instead of gems, and imagine them dusted in flour at dawn, kneading soft dough before the palace awakes. Her lips curl into a small, satisfied smile. Later that evening, after the feast has ended and the braziers are snuffed out one by one, the Sultan calls his vizier to his private chamber, where lamplight pools golden across thick Persian carpets. The Sultan reclines on his cushioned dais, stroking his beard with deliberate slowness as he recounts exactly what he overheard from behind the embroidered curtain. The vizier listens intently, though he swallows hard when the Sultan's dark gaze flickers up to meet his own. "Bring me the eldest sister tomorrow at dawn," the Sultan commands. "If she desires the baker's life, so be it. We will grant it to her." Historians still argue whether this was an act of indulgence or mockery. Did the Sultan grant her wish out of kindness, or did he find her ambition too small, too simple, to deserve anything greater? Some medieval chronicles suggest he admired her modest desire for fragrant abundance. Others say he laughed at her for wanting so little when she could have aimed for the throne itself. Morning comes, crisp and lavender gray, the call to prayer echoing from the minarets beyond the palace walls. You stand beside the vizier as he arrives at the sisters' modest courtyard dwelling. The eldest answers the door, eyes still swollen with sleep, hair tangled around her shoulders. She looks surprised to see the royal official at her threshold, though a flush of hope rises in her cheeks. She is taken to the palace kitchens, where the royal baker, a stout man with burn-scarred forearms and kind brown eyes, greets her with a silent bow. Within hours, she is betrothed to him, and by dusk, she is wrapped in garlands of jasmine, her hair combed and oiled, a silver anklet chiming as she walks. That night, as she lies on her thin cotton mattress in the baker's chamber, she inhales the yeasty perfume of sourdoughs proofing in wicker baskets. It is an aroma that wraps her in a tender embrace, filling her lungs with warmth. You hear her sigh softly in the dark, a sound of satisfaction, though tinged with something unspoken, like the ache of a flute note left hanging in the evening air. The next morning, before the dawn breaks fully over the date palms and domes, she rises to knead dough alongside her husband. Her fingers dip into clay jars of sesame and nigella seeds, scattering them across round breads ready for the oven's fiery belly. The heat curls her hair against her damp forehead, her cheeks flushed with the exertion of shaping hundreds of loaves for the palace above. You notice how she closes her eyes when the first batch emerges, blistered golden and speckled with seeds. She lifts one to her nose, breathing deep. For a moment, she looks truly radiant, as though crowned by the morning sun itself. Historians still argue whether she lived happily ever after. Your mind whispers. Some say she grew plump and content, with 5 children and the scent of cardamom always clinging to her veils. Others claim she spent long, silent nights wondering why she had not aimed higher, why she had not dreamed of silks and palanquins instead of sesame breads and baklava trays. You watch her knead, fold, and shape the dough, her bangles tinkling like distant bells. A strand of dough coils around her wrist, sticky and pale. She peels it off with a chuckle, glancing up at her husband who kneads beside her, his hands strong and sure. Their laughter mingles with the sizzle and crackle of breads baking behind them, rising into the cinnamon-scented air. "Hey, careful with that flour sack," he teases, his mustache twitching with amusement. "We don't want a repeat of last week's avalanche." She grins, brushing flour from her nose. "Perhaps it's the dough gods demanding tribute again," he snorts, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm. "If there are dough gods, I hope they accept burnt crusts as sacrifice." You chuckle under your breath. Dough gods. Add that to your mental list of kitchen deities alongside the legendary Roman household spirits. Even here in this medieval palace bakery, humor is a balm against the blistering ovens and hours of labor. But you see the quiet flicker in her gaze as she watches the palace towers through the small clay mesh window above the kneading table. Perhaps there is contentment there. Perhaps there is longing. Perhaps there is simply a woman kneading dough in the silent pre-dawn hours, finding beauty in the steady rhythm of her life. You remain near the bakery window as dawn unfolds into morning, amber light spilling across the tiled floor. The eldest sister kneads her dough with quiet focus, but your gaze drifts beyond her to the bustling palace courtyard, where the middle sister's story begins to stir. She wakes that morning in her shared chamber, the scent of fresh bread wafting through the shutters. For a moment, jealousy gnaws at her. Her elder sister's dream has come true so swiftly, but she brushes the thought away with the back of her hand, rising to comb her hair, dark and glossy as a raven's wing, then weaving it into a long braid tied with a crimson ribbon. Later that day, the Sultan reclines upon his embroidered dais, his lion-claw feet propped upon a velvet cushion. He strokes his beard, remembering the second wish he overheard. With a flick of his fingers, he signals his vizier. "Bring me the middle sister," he commands, his voice rippling through the chamber like cool water down marble steps. She shall wed the royal cook, as she desires. Historians still argue whether this decision was rooted in benevolence or quiet disdain. Did the Sultan believe her wish for endless delicacies was childish, or did he grant it with secret admiration for her unapologetic hunger for pleasure? The vizier finds her sitting by a pomegranate tree, peeling fruit into a glazed bowl. Red jewels stain her fingertips as she looks up, startled. Then her lips slowly curve into a knowing smile. Within hours, she is whisked into the palace kitchens, where copper pots hang in golden rows and cinnamon smoke coils lazily above iron stoves. The royal cook is a towering man with shoulders like ox yokes and a beard flecked with flour and turmeric. He greets her with a nod, a half smile tugging at his lips, as he lifts a steaming pot to pour saffron stew into a bronze serving dish. She is married that very evening. No pomp, no parade, just jasmine water poured over their hands in a quiet ceremony beneath the domed kitchen roof, and a garland of mint and thyme draped around her shoulders. That night, as she lies beside her new husband upon thick wool blankets near the ovens. She listens to the bubbling pots and sizzling pans, the scent of ghee and cumin drifting into her dreams. Her stomach growls despite the feast she sampled earlier. She chuckles softly to herself, realizing she may never know hunger again. Historians still argue whether she ever left the kitchens again. Your thoughts whisper. Some say she became a queen among cooks, commanding the spice inventory and inventing new recipes that spread across empires. Others claim she remained a simple helper, tasting sauces and scrubbing copper pots, forever intoxicated by scents she could never fully possess. The next morning, you stand beside her as she explores every pot and jar. She dips her fingers into a clay pot of cinnamon, inhaling its sweet bite, then sprinkles it into a bubbling cauldron of milk and rice. "Careful, my dear," her husband murmurs, tasting with a wooden spoon. "Too much cinnamon and the Sultan will think we've stolen his entire trade route." She laughs lightly, licking her fingertip. "Let him think what he wishes. He still eats it all the same." He grins, wiping his spoon on a folded linen cloth. "Perhaps you should be the cook instead of me." She tilts her head, braid falling over her shoulder. "Perhaps I already am." You smile at her audacity. Even here in the steamy kitchens, she carries herself like royalty, her gaze sweeping the ingredients with a conqueror's hunger. Outside the arched window, the gardens bloom with hibiscus and night jasmine, and the scent mingles with garlic roasting in the oven, creating a strange, delicious perfume. As she samples a thick lamb stew, licking the wooden spoon with languid pleasure, you almost envy her. Almost. Until a cockroach scuttles across the stone floor near her sandals, and she jumps back with a shriek, sloshing stew across her skirts. Historians still argue whether cockroaches were considered sacred omens or vermin. You muse as her husband laughs, lifting the insect gently with a copper spatula and tossing it out the window. Some ancient texts claim they were signs of tenacity, others mere harbingers of filth. Either way, the stew is ruined, and she glares at the window as if it personally offended her dreams of culinary dominance. You watch as she calms herself, wiping lamb broth from her ankles. Then she picks up another spoon, dips it into the pot, and tastes again. Because if there's one thing you're learning about the middle sister, it's that nothing keeps her from tasting what she wants. Not scalding soup, not cockroaches, and certainly not the shadows of other people's opinions. You linger near the kitchen arches as dawn curls into noon, watching the middle sister stir honey into rosewater sherbet, her face flushed with heat and triumph. But your gaze shifts beyond her, drawn to a quiet chamber where the youngest sister sits alone, fingers plucking at a threadbare cushion in her lap. Unlike her siblings, she has not been summoned yet. Sunlight falls across her face in golden stripes, illuminating her dark eyes as they stare into the middle distance. She does not fidget or sigh. Instead, her gaze is steady, almost predatory in its calm. The quiet hum of the palace seems to gather around her, as if waiting to hear her next words. She whispers to herself, "The Sultan himself," testing the shape of the words on her tongue like tasting a new spice. Her lips curl into a small smile. Elsewhere in the palace, the Sultan sits upon his dais, the vizier reading petitions at his feet. But the Sultan is distracted, his mind replaying her bold declaration, to bear him sons with golden hair and pearl teeth. He drums his fingers on the lion-headed armrest, a deep, rhythmic thud echoing through the marble chamber. Finally, with a decisive flick of his hand, he commands, "Bring me the youngest sister. She will be mine." Historians still argue whether this decision was driven by her beauty, her audacity, or simply curiosity to test whether her claim could come true. Some chronicles romanticize it as love at first hearing. Others frame it as cold calculation, seeking a supernatural heir. The vizier arrives at her doorway at dusk, where she is still seated silently on the same cushion. When he bows low and tells her of the sultan's summons, she merely rises, smooths her linen shift, and follows him without a word. No tears, no squeals of joy, only quiet acceptance, her eyes fixed ahead. You walk beside her as she ascends the palace stairs, the carved marble steps cool beneath her bare feet. Braziers flicker along the corridor, shadows dancing across her serene face. Servants rush forward to bathe her, comb her hair with sandalwood oil, and dress her in robes of indigo silk embroidered with gold lotus flowers. They place a delicate silver circlet upon her brow and stain her lips crimson with crushed hibiscus petals. When she is led into the sultan's chamber, she bows gracefully, her hair pooling like dark water across the mosaic floor. The sultan gazes at her in silence, studying the curve of her neck, the steady light in her eyes. Finally, he rises, his robes whispering across the dais as he approaches. "Your sisters wished for bakers and cooks," he says, his voice low as thunder beneath velvet. "But you wish for me." She lifts her eyes to his without flinching. "Yes," she says simply. "And I will bear you sons with hair of gold and teeth like pearls." Historians still argue whether her calm reply was born of fearlessness or desperation. Some say she was a cunning fortune-teller's apprentice, weaving spells into her words. Others insist she was simply a young girl whose dreams burned brighter than caution. That night, their marriage is sealed in quiet splendor. No grand feast, only a private ceremony beneath the moonlit arches, with jasmine oil burning in carved alabaster lamps and rose petals strewn across their silken bed. Outside, the desert wind sighs through the cypress trees, carrying the distant call of night birds across the courtyard. You sit at the edge of the chamber, feeling the cool marble against your palms, as the sultan strokes her cheek and murmurs soft promises in a language older than the palace itself. She listens silently, her gaze fixed upon the moonlit window, where stars burn cold and distant in the indigo sky. In the weeks that follow, the palace buzzes with rumors. Servants gossip in hushed tones as they scrub floors and prepare meals, speculating about her fortune and whether her prophecy will come true. The royal astrologer is summoned to chart auspicious dates for conception, while midwives polish their brass birthing bowls and gather herbs to ease labor pains. Historians still argue whether palace midwives truly used pigeon blood to ward off evil spirits during childbirth. Your mind notes as you watch them grind dried marjoram and knot red threads to hang over the birthing bed. Some texts claim it was pigeon blood, others goat's milk mixed with saffron, dripped onto the mother's belly in protective circles. Meanwhile, the youngest sister walks the palace gardens each dawn, her footsteps silent upon dew-soaked grass, her hands folded over her belly. She pauses by the lotus pool, watching koi drift beneath jade lilies. When a gardener greets her, she nods politely but speaks no words, her thoughts turned inward, weaving dreams of golden-haired sons with pearl teeth who will one day rule this vast and fragrant kingdom. Morning breaks over the palace like a silent prayer, golden light washing across mosaic tiles and courtyards, heavy with orange blossom fragrance. You find yourself standing in the royal bedchamber as the youngest sister wakes, her dark hair fanned out across the embroidered pillow, the scent of sandalwood still clinging to her skin. The sultan sits nearby upon a cushioned dais, already dressed in his embroidered robes of deep sapphire and bronze. His beard has been combed and perfumed with amber oil, and he sips steaming cardamom coffee from a handleless cup as he watches her stir awake. "Rise," he says gently, his voice rumbling like distant thunder beneath summer rain. "Today, the astrologers have declared an auspicious hour. We will make our offering at dawn, and tonight we shall conceive." She sits up slowly, hair falling in glossy ripples down her back. Her dark eyes remain calm, betraying neither eagerness nor fear. You watch as she folds her hands over her knees and nods once, as if confirming her own secret plan rather than his command. Historians still argue whether she truly believed in the astrologers' declarations, or whether she simply obeyed palace ritual to ensure her place in the royal hierarchy. Some scholars propose she had been taught secret charms by an old herbalist woman in her childhood quarter, a charm that might tip fate in her favor. After bathing in water scented with lotus and myrrh, she is led by 2 silent maidservants to the small prayer chamber near the eastern gates. There, brass lanterns sway gently from arched ceilings, their cutwork casting trembling stars across the pale marble floor. She kneels upon an indigo silk cushion, pressing her forehead to the cold stone 3 times, while a priest mutters verses over her bowed head. The Sultan stands behind her, hands folded into his robes, watching every careful movement. You sense his anticipation, though it hums beneath a veil of dignified calm. As the prayer ends, he reaches down to lift her gently to her feet. And for a fleeting moment, his fingers linger against her cheek in an unspoken promise. Later that evening, as shadows lengthen across the courtyard and evening lamps are lit one by one, the palace midwives gather outside her chamber, whispering among themselves. One carries a clay bowl filled with rosewater and gold leaf. Another holds a brass censer smoldering with benzoin resin to ward off evil spirits. Historians still argue whether burning benzoin truly prevented curses or simply masked unpleasant scents. You note, watching the curling smoke drift upwards to the carved cedar beams. Inside, the youngest sister reclines upon her silken bed, her belly now slightly rounded with the early swell of life. The Sultan sits beside her, fingers stroking her wrist as she describes the dream she had the previous night. "I saw 2 suns rising from my belly," she murmurs, her voice a silken whisper against the hush of the chamber. "One burned gold like dawn, the other pale as pearl. They floated above the palace, and everyone bowed before them." The Sultan's lips twitch with a rare smile. "Then it shall be so," he replies, though you hear the edge of tension beneath his calm. For all his power, even he cannot command the unseen threads of fate. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. She walks the palace gardens each dawn, her hands cradling her growing belly, pausing to watch the koi flash gold and ivory beneath lotus leaves. Servants bow low as she passes, their eyes flickering with wonder and envy. When her time comes, the palace erupts in frantic preparation. The midwives boil water in brass kettles, hanging protective talismans of blue glass and silver thread over the carved birthing bed. The priest recites verses near the window, his voice trembling with urgency. And finally, as dawn blushes across the minarets, you hear the first thin wail of a newborn. The midwife lifts the baby high into the filtered morning light, gasping as she sees golden curls tumbling across his tiny shoulders. A second cry pierces the room moments later as his brother emerges, his hair equally luminous, their pearl-like teeth sprouting already from tender gums. Historians still argue whether babies truly had teeth at birth. Your mind whispers, remembering old Arabic chronicles describing miraculous infants born ready to bite fate itself. Skeptics dismiss such tales as poetic embellishment. Believers claim it proves destiny's fingerprints upon their souls. The Sultan enters, robes flaring behind him, eyes gleaming with wonder and pride. He lifts both babies into his arms, their golden hair catching the lamplight like twin halos. The youngest sister lies back upon silken pillows, exhausted but smiling, her dark eyes glimmering with triumph. She has fulfilled her promise. She has birthed legends, and though her body trembles with weakness, though pain still hums beneath her skin, you see a fierce light in her gaze as she watches her sons cradled against their father's chest. She does not look away, even when sleep threatens to drag her down into silent darkness. Because in that final waking moment, she knows she has bent the world to her will. You remain by her bedside as morning swells into full daylight, sunlight spilling across the silken sheets where she lies resting, her eyelids fluttering with dreams. The palace is alive with hushed excitement, servants scurrying like silent bees through marble halls to spread the news. The Sultan's wife has birthed 2 miraculous sons with golden hair and pearl teeth. But not everyone welcomes this dawn with joy. Beyond the carved cedar doors, in a shadowed alcove lined with painted tiles of lapis and emerald, the 2 elder sisters stand together, their heads bent close, voices hissing with envy. You watch them from your hidden corner, their faces twisted with resentment as they clutch each other's hands, nails digging into soft flesh. She was nothing. The eldest spits softly, her green robe rustling as she shifts. A slip of a girl with no dowry, no jewels, no skill beyond her pretty face. The middle sister's lips curl into a sneer. And now she has borne the Sultan heirs that outshine every prince in Persia. If these children live, they will rule everything, and she will forever stand above us. Historians still argue whether jealousy alone drove their next act, or whether a cunning old maid whispered dark counsel into their ears. Some versions claim it was the midwives themselves, bribed by the sisters with gold coins hidden in sesame sacks. Other tales insist the sisters brewed the plan alone, their envy seething hotter than oven flames. That night, as the palace sleeps beneath a violet sky scattered with trembling stars, the 2 elder sisters slip barefoot along the tiled halls, their shadows long and wavering in the lamplight. They enter the birthing chamber quietly, the heavy scent of rosewater and blood still clinging to the air. The midwives doze against the wall, exhausted by hours of chanting and tending. In the bassinet near the carved ivory screen, the 2 infants sleep, golden curls glowing in the lamplight, their tiny mouths parted in soft, sighing breaths. For a moment, the sisters hesitate, their eyes caught by the impossible beauty of these children. The youngest twin stretches in his sleep, his pearl teeth catching the flicker of the flame. He looks almost divine, but envy has no room for awe. The eldest sister lifts the first child with trembling hands, his warmth and softness shocking her like hot oil on bare skin. The middle sister lifts the second, tears brimming in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of bitter fury that something so perfect could belong to her rival. Silently, they replace the infants with 2 squirming animals, a puppy and a kitten, drugged with poppy milk to keep them still. They bundle the golden-haired babies into a woven palm chest lined with old linens and slip out into the moonlit courtyard, where the scent of blooming jasmine hangs heavy in the cool night air. You follow them as they creep to the riverbank beyond the palace walls. Reeds sway in the breeze, whispering secrets to the water. They push the chest into the slow-moving current, their eyes fixed on its pale shape as it drifts away, swallowed by darkness. Historians still argue whether the river was the Tigris or a lesser irrigation canal feeding palace gardens. You muse, watching the chest bob and turn, reeds brushing its sides like ghostly fingers. Some chronicles place the palace in Baghdad, others in a lost Persian capital whose name has been erased by time. When the sisters return to the palace, dawn is already brushing the horizon in lavender streaks. They slip back into their chambers, wash their hands with rose water, and lie upon their bedding as if they had never left. The scent of river reeds clinging faintly to their robes. Later that morning, the Sultan enters the birthing chamber to see his sons again. The youngest sister wakes with a sleepy smile, but it freezes on her lips when she sees the midwives shrieking in terror. The Sultan stares in shock at the puppy and kitten squirming in the bassinet, their eyes crusted shut, tiny bodies trembling with hunger. The chamber explodes in noise, midwives wailing, maids crossing themselves, a priest chanting protective verses. The Sultan's eyes darken like a brewing storm as he looks down at his wife, who clutches at his robe with trembling hands. "I bore you, sons," she whispers hoarsely, her voice cracking like pottery in the kiln. Sons with hair of gold and teeth like pearls, but the evidence before him mocks her words. He turns away in silence, his face a mask of cold stone. The guards seize her roughly, dragging her from the chamber as she cries out, protesting her innocence. Her wails echo down the long mosaic halls, mingling with the wails of the two small animals left behind. Historians still argue whether the Sultan truly believed she birthed animals. You reflect quietly, your chest tight as you follow her being hauled away. Some scholars claim he knew, but was bound by honor to act as though he did not. Others believe grief clouded his reason entirely. The golden dawn rises over the palace roofs, gilding the minarets and tiled domes in pure light. But within its walls, a darkness has unfurled, a darkness born of envy, fear, and a betrayal so profound it will ripple through every heart it touches. You follow the woven chest as it drifts downstream, reeds brushing its sides like ghostly hands. The river is wide here, its muddy water swirling with silent purpose beneath the dawn sky. Mist rises from its surface, curling around the chest and hiding it from sight each time the current twists it gently. Inside, the two babies sleep unaware, golden curls haloing their flushed faces, their pearl-like teeth catching dim slivers of morning light. They murmur softly in their dreams, their tiny fists curled against each other's warmth. Historians still argue whether the chest floated for hours or days. Some versions of the tale claim river spirits guided it safely to shore within a single sunrise. Others insist it drifted for 3 nights, guarded by jinn who veiled it from wolves and thieves. Eventually, the chest bumps against a grassy bank lined with tamarisk trees. Birds flit through the branches, chirping sleepily as dawn breaks pink and gold across the sky. An old gardener tending his herbs nearby hears the gentle thud and looks up from his basket of freshly snipped mint. He is a thin, stooped man with skin tanned like aged parchment and a beard streaked with gray and white. His robes are patched at the knees, stained green from decades of pruning vines and kneeling among onion beds. He frowns at the sight of the drifting chest, setting aside his basket to wade into the shallows with surprising swiftness for his years. The chest is heavier than it looks, and he grunts as he drags it up the muddy bank, water sloshing from between its woven reeds. With trembling fingers, he undoes the bindings and lifts the lid. Inside, the golden-haired twins blink sleepily at him, their pearl teeth flashing as they yawn in unison. For a moment, the old gardener thinks he has found 2 tiny angels fallen from paradise. His chest tightens with wonder and fear, and tears spring unbidden to his eyes. Historians still argue whether this gardener was a palace servant in hiding or merely a humble herb seller. Your mind whispers as you watch him lift the infants gently into his arms. Some chronicles call him a Sufi mystic tending sacred gardens. Others claim he was an exile banished for offending the Sultan's vizier decades earlier. Regardless, he takes them home to his small clay house by the edge of the river, where vines coil over its roof and rows of herbs grow thick and sweet-smelling under the morning sun. He lays them upon his straw sleeping mat, tucks a faded cotton blanket around their kicking legs, and feeds them goat's milk from a carved horn spoon. You watch him work with quiet efficiency, warming milk over a clay brazier, testing its temperature upon his wrist before feeding each child in turn. He hums softly beneath his breath, an old folk melody about pomegranate trees and faithful dogs. The babies listen, their eyelids drooping with drowsy satisfaction, their tiny bellies full and warm. Days turn into weeks. The twins grow stronger under his care, their golden hair shining brighter each dawn as if spun from the rising sun itself. Their pearl teeth no longer look eerie, but simply beautiful. Little flashes of brightness when they smile and gurgle at each other across the straw mat. He names them Marwan and Soraya, though historians still argue over these names. Some versions call them Qamar and Shams, moon and sun. Others give them Persian names meaning glory and light. But to him, they are simply his children of the river, delivered to him like a final blessing in his old age. At night, he sits outside his small home, smoking his long reed pipe as the stars glitter coldly overhead. The twins sleep inside upon wool blankets beside the brazier's dying embers. Fireflies blink in the herb garden, illuminating sage, thyme, and rows of violet lavender. You watch him exhale a thin stream of smoke, eyes reflecting the crescent moon above. He speaks softly to the darkness. "Perhaps you were meant for thrones and palaces," he murmurs. "But here you will learn earth and water first. Before one rules, one must know how roots seek water in silence." A moth flutters past his ear, and he chuckles to himself. "Historians still argue whether I ever existed," he says, as if answering your unspoken thoughts. "But that does not matter. What matters is that I kept them alive." You listen to the crickets chirping in the reeds, the river sighing beyond the tamarisk trees, and the gentle rustle of the twins shifting in sleep inside. This tiny clay house, lit only by moonlight and the embers' last glow, holds within it the hidden future of a kingdom. Two children lost and found, who one day will awaken the world with the truth of who they are. You remain in the small clay house by the riverbank, lulled by the scent of mint and lavender drifting in from the moonlit herb garden. The twins sleep curled together on their straw mat, their golden curls tangling into one shining mass, pearl teeth glinting each time they yawn or murmur in their dreams. Days pass into months, and the old gardener cares for them with tender diligence. You watch him teach them to walk upon the packed dirt floor, their chubby legs wobbling as they grip his calloused fingers. He laughs each time they tumble into his lap, his eyes creasing with mirth and warmth. Historians still argue whether he taught them only herbs and prayers, or if he shared secrets of the palace from which he had once been exiled. Some tales say he was a master gardener who designed royal courtyards blooming with irises and damask roses. Others claim he was a former vizier's scribe, fluent in Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit, forced into obscurity after offending a jealous rival. What is certain is this: he raises them not as royalty, but as children of earth and river. At dawn, they follow him into the garden, tiny hands trailing over sage leaves and basil stems, tasting sweet fennel fronds fresh from the stalk. He teaches them to water the rose before the sun rises too high, their laughter mingling with the calls of hoopoe birds perched upon the tamarisk branches. When midday heat presses heavy upon the clay walls, he sits them upon woven mats in the shaded doorway and tells them stories. Tales of the moon goddess who hides her silver palace in the river's reflection. Stories of heroes who drink lion's milk to gain strength. Myths of secret cities beneath the desert sands, where spirits forge mirrors that reflect only truths. Historians still argue whether these stories were Sumerian echoes or later Persian embellishments. Your thoughts whisper as you watch the children's eyes grow wide with wonder. At night, after bowls of rice cooked with lentils and cumin, he tucks them beneath cotton blankets faded from sun and years. They sleep deeply, their small bellies warm and full, their golden hair fanning across the straw mats like threads of dawn itself. But beyond these peaceful walls, the world moves on with ruthless indifference. In the palace, the youngest sister remains locked within a stone chamber, her silken robes replaced by coarse wool, her hair unbraided and tangled around her shoulders. She sits upon a low pallet stuffed with straw, staring at the carved wooden door that never opens, save for a guard to shove in a tray of stale bread and watered soup. She cradles her empty arms each night, lips trembling with silent prayers. "My sons live," she whispers to herself, over and over, like prayer beads clicking through trembling fingers. "My sons live." Historians still argue whether she was fed enough to survive out of pity or punishment. Some chronicles claim the Sultan's heart softened in secret. Others insist she was kept alive only as a warning to any woman who dared claim divine children. Back in the gardener's clay house, the twins grow strong and radiant. The boy, Marwan, is fearless, climbing tamarisk trees to pluck tender seed pods that he chews thoughtfully while watching river egrets spear fish in the shallows. His sister, Soraya, is gentler, weaving garlands from lavender sprigs and binding them around her wrists and ankles, her scent following her like a blessing wherever she goes. One morning, as the sun rises in pale gold over the river reeds, the old gardener sits upon his reed mat, sharpening his pruning knife. He pauses to watch them chase each other through rows of blooming fennel and basil, their laughter rising into the waking sky. Historians still argue whether he revealed their true parentage before his death. You reflect quietly. Some versions say he told them every truth by the river's edge, giving them blessings and final advice. Others claim he died before he could share their royal origin, leaving them only rumors and half-remembered dreams. But in this moment, he calls them to his side. They scamper over, feet dusty, hair tangled with fallen blossoms. He rests his gnarled hands upon their heads, feeling the living sun beneath his palms. "Listen to me," he murmurs, his voice like wind brushing the tops of reeds. "The world is wide, and truth lies hidden like a river beneath sand. One day, you will leave this garden. One day, you will seek what was stolen from you." They look up at him with round, curious eyes, not fully understanding his words but sensing their weight. He smiles softly, brushing hair from their foreheads, his fingers trembling with age and silent grief. "Until then," he says, his voice trailing into the hush of dawn, "know that you were loved. Know that you were wanted. And know that the world is waiting for you." You feel the hush settle across the herb garden, the river sighing softly beyond the tamarisk trees, and the silent promise that, no matter how hidden truth may remain, it cannot be buried forever. You watch dawn seep into the clay house like warm milk into bread, illuminating every crack in the walls and every wrinkle in the old gardener's face. He wakes before the twins, as always, though today his limbs tremble more than usual, and his breath rattles softly in his chest. He boils water over the clay brazier, adding dried thyme and licorice root to soothe his cough. Outside, the river mist lifts, revealing reeds shimmering silver under the pale sun. The twins sleep on, curled together beneath the cotton blanket, their golden hair a radiant tangle against the woven mat. Historians still argue whether it was illness or sheer old age that claimed him. Some claim a fever took him swiftly after tending his herb beds in a rainstorm. Others say he simply closed his eyes and drifted away, his final breath as quiet as the breeze rustling through tamarisk leaves. But before that final moment comes, he wakes them gently. Marwan blinks first, rubbing his eyes with small, strong fists. Soraya yawns beside him, stretching her slender arms overhead, bracelets of dried lavender rattling faintly against her wrists. "Come, my children," he whispers, his voice low and hoarse. "Today, we go to the city." Their eyes widen with wonder. They have never gone beyond the river gardens, never seen the wide market streets or heard the cries of merchants peddling copper pots and strings of dried figs. Excitement crackles around them like a summer storm as they dress quickly in linen tunics patched with scraps of indigo and rust-red cloth. The old man wraps a faded wool shawl around his thin shoulders and takes his carved walking staff in hand. Together, they walk the narrow dirt path leading to the city gates, their shadows long against the dawn-lit fields. Soraya skips ahead, weaving garlands from wild mint and crowning Marwan with a wreath that tilts over one ear. He laughs, chasing her down the path, his golden hair glinting in the early sun. Historians still argue whether this journey was fated or merely luck. Your thoughts whisper as you drift beside them. Some claim he chose this day, knowing it would be his last, intending to place the children in the world before his departure. Others argue it was simply market day, and fate twisted their journey toward destiny. The city emerges from the dawn mist like a mirage of pale stone and turquoise-tiled domes. Minarets rise into the sky, and the scent of baking bread, frying onions, and sun-warmed spices floods the streets. Merchants cry out their wares, donkeys bray under towering bundles of date fronds, and barefoot children dart between carts laden with apricots and oranges. The twins cling to each other as they follow the old man through the chaos. Their eyes shine with wonder at the sight of a snake charmer playing his reed flute, while a pale cobra sways beneath the awning's shade. They peer into baskets overflowing with figs, walnuts, and fat golden raisins. A brass seller waves polished plates at them, the reflections flashing blindingly bright under the sun. At the far end of the market, the old gardener pauses to rest against a shaded wall, sweat beading along his temples. His breath comes shallow, his chest rising and falling with ragged tremors. Marwan places a hand upon his knee, his small brow furrowed with worry. "Are you tired, Baba?" he asks softly. The old man smiles weakly, his gaze flickering between them. "Just catching my breath." "My son," Soraya cups water from a nearby fountain, her slender fingers trembling as she lifts it to his cracked lips. He drinks gratefully, his eyelids fluttering closed for a moment as the coolness soothes his parched throat. Historians still argue whether he told them the truth in these final moments. You reflect. Some tales say he whispered their royal lineage to them right there, under the arching city gate. Others claim he died with the secret locked behind his silent lips, leaving them to discover it themselves in the cruel unfolding of fate. He reaches out to touch their faces, fingers tracing each delicate brow, each rounded cheek. Tears gather in his clouded eyes. But his voice remains steady as he whispers, "My children, you are meant for far greater things than I ever dreamed. Forgive me for not giving you all you deserve." His breath catches on the final word, shoulders sagging as his head bows forward. The twins cry out softly, clutching his hands, shaking his thin arms, but his chest no longer rises, and his eyes remain closed, peaceful beneath the morning sun. Around them, the market thrums on. A woman sells cardamom bread to a weary porter. A boy chases a goat down a dusty alley. 2 doves flutter from a fountain to roost upon the turquoise dome overhead. Life flows past the 2 children kneeling beside the silent old man, unaware that the world has shifted forever beneath their feet. Historians still argue whether passers-by helped them that morning or turned away in fear of orphaned beggars. Your mind murmurs as you watch them rock his lifeless body gently, whispering his name into the hot breeze. Some say a kindly merchant took pity on them. Others claim a palace guard noticed Marwan's hair glinting gold in the sun, and knew then that destiny was rising to reclaim what had been stolen. But for now, all that exists is grief, quiet and absolute. In the growing heat of the waking city, you remain beside the twins in the market's growing heat, the scent of dust, cardamom, and donkey sweat thick in the morning air. They kneel beside the old gardener's still body, their small hands pressed against his lifeless chest, as though warmth might return if they simply will it hard enough. Soraya leans her forehead to his knee, silent tears tracking down her cheeks into the folds of his patched wool robe. Marwan grips the old man's wrist, feeling for a pulse he cannot find. Golden hair falling forward to veil his stricken face. Around them, the market churns with indifferent noise. Merchants haggle. Children shriek with laughter. Goats bleat and butt each other near the spice stalls. Finally, a passing water seller pauses, his clay jugs clinking softly against each other. He sets down his carrying pole, squints at the scene, then crouches beside them. Historians still argue whether this man was the first to guess their royal blood. Your thoughts murmur as he gently lays a hand upon Marwan's trembling shoulder. Some tales claim he recognized the boy's golden curls as an omen. Others insist he was simply a kind man moved by pity. "Come, children," he says softly, voice rough with years of shouting prices over market noise. "Your grandfather is gone to Allah's garden now. You cannot remain here." They stare up at him with wide, lost eyes. Soraya clings tighter to the gardener's lifeless hand, refusing to let go. But the water seller sighs, shifts his jugs aside, and lifts the old man's frail body into his arms with a grunt of effort. "Follow me," he commands gently. And so they do, trailing after him through the crowded market streets, past open workshops hammering brass trays and alleys filled with singing beggars and stray cats drowsing atop stacked wool carpets. He brings them to the mosque courtyard, cool beneath its white stone arches, where pigeons strut and coo near the fountain. There, under the shaded eaves, they wash the old gardener's body with rosewater and sandalwood soap, wrapping him in unbleached linen before the noon prayer begins. Marwan stands silently, fists clenched at his sides, while Soraya weeps softly into her tunic sleeve, the embroidered lavender flowers damp against her cheek. When the imam comes to recite the funeral verses, he pauses mid-phrase upon seeing them. "Whose children are these?" he asks quietly, gesturing to their shining hair and pearl-like teeth glinting each time they sob. The water seller bows his head. "They came with him from the river gardens. I do not know their names nor lineage." Historians still argue whether the imam suspected their truth in that moment. your mind whispers. Some say he was a palace priest in disguise, exiled for criticizing corrupt viziers, and recognized the children from the birth rumors years before. Others believe he thought them simple foundlings blessed with odd beauty. After the prayer, the gardener is buried in the small graveyard beyond the mosque walls, beneath a tamarisk tree whose feathery branches sigh in the desert breeze. The twins kneel by the fresh mound of earth, Soraya placing a tiny garland of mint blossoms at its head, while Marwan smooths the soil with his trembling fingers. They sleep that night beneath the mosque colonnade, curled against each other for warmth, the stone cool against their feverish skin. Pigeons roost in the arches overhead, their soft cooing mingling with distant jackal howls beyond the city walls. At dawn, the water seller finds them awake, silent and hollow-eyed. He crouches before them, his leather sandals creaking softly. "You cannot stay here forever," he says. "Come with me. I will feed you and teach you my trade." And so, for a time, you follow them through the market streets each day, carrying clay jugs of cool water upon a wooden yoke across Marwan's growing shoulders. Soraya trails behind with a small brass bowl, offering sips to weary travelers for a single copper coin. Their feet grow calloused against the sun-baked stones, their bodies strong with labor, their eyes sharper with each passing day. They sleep each night upon woven reed mats in his dim stone storeroom, filled with stacked clay jugs and bundles of drying mint. The water seller snores softly nearby, dreaming of youth and lost wives. The twins whisper to each other beneath their thin blanket. "One day," Marwan murmurs, "I will find out who we truly are." "And I," Soraya replies, her voice trembling with the fierce certainty of dawn, "will make them pay for what they did to our mother." Historians still argue whether these childhood vows shaped their future or merely echoed fate's deeper designs. Your thoughts whisper as you watch them drift into restless sleep, golden curls tangled together upon the reed mat. But beneath the whispering shadows of the storeroom, you sense it clearly. A storm is gathering behind their quiet resolve. A storm that will one day sweep away every lie spun to bury their truth. You awaken with them beneath the woven reed mat, the scent of drying mint heavy in the early morning air. Outside, the first pink streaks of dawn bloom above the turquoise-domed mosque. Marwan sits up quietly, rolling his shoulders to ease the ache from carrying water jugs all day. Soraya remains curled beneath the blanket, her golden curls spilling across the mat like threads of spun sunlight. The water seller snores in his corner, a gentle rumble beneath the city's waking murmurs. Marwan nudges his sister softly. "Come," he whispers, "before the market wakes. Today, we find out who we are." She blinks sleep from her eyes, her pearl teeth flashing as she yawns. They rise together, slip past the sleeping water seller, and creep out into the gray dawn streets. Pigeons scatter before them, flapping up to perch upon cracked stone cornices. The smell of baking flatbread drifts from distant ovens, mingling with the damp stone's earthy coolness. Historians still argue whether this decision arose from childish curiosity or a deeper instinct of destiny stirring in their blood. Some versions claim a beggar woman told them a prophecy the night before. Others insist Marwan woke with a dream of a golden throne and pearl-studded crown. They make their way to the city's northern gate, where caravans gather before dawn to load dates, saffron, and brass trays bound for distant deserts. Beyond the gate lies the royal road, flanked by tamarisk groves and flowering oleander bushes, leading to the palace that gleams far across the plain like a mirage. Soraya grips her brother's hand tightly. "Are we truly going there?" she asks, her voice small but vibrating with fierce hope. He nods. We have to. If we were meant for something greater, we must find it ourselves. They walk all morning, dust rising around their bare feet, sun gilding their hair until passing travelers turn to stare. A caravan leader offers them bread dipped in olive oil, unable to resist their radiant, hungry faces. They eat gratefully, thank him, and continue along the road with renewed resolve. As noon's heat presses down, they arrive at the palace gates, towering cedarwood carved with twisting vines and lotus flowers, flanked by guards in bronze helmets and scaled tunics. The children stand there, dusty and sunburned, their tunics stained with sweat. Historians still argue whether the guards saw their resemblance to the Sultan instantly. Your mind notes. Some chronicles describe the guards falling to their knees in shock. Others say they mocked the dusty twins until a passing court astrologer recognized destiny's signs. "Who are you?" a guard demands, his spear gleaming in the fierce sun. Marwan lifts his chin, eyes hard as polished amber. "We are the children of the river," he declares, voice steady despite its tremor. "Let us see the Sultan." The guards laugh at first. But as the sunlight catches Soraya's hair and flashes against their pearl teeth, their laughter fades. Unease stirs in their bellies like a scorpion's tail brushing bare skin. One guard turns to his captain. "Fetch the vizier," he mutters. Soon, a thin man in dark embroidered robes arrives, rings flashing upon every bony finger. His sharp eyes study them with quick, darting movements like a lizard surveying potential prey. Historians still argue whether this vizier already suspected the truth. Your thoughts whisper. Some tales paint him as an ambitious schemer, desperate to protect the sisters' secret. Others call him a wise man who recognized fate's weaving immediately. He gestures to the guards. "Bring them in, quietly." They are led through cool, tiled halls echoing with fountain music, past courtyards blooming with orange trees and roses cascading over marble colonnades. Servants pause in their sweeping to stare wide-eyed at the golden-haired children passing silently among them. Finally, they reach a small receiving chamber where the vizier orders water and fresh dates brought on a silver tray. The twins sit upon embroidered cushions, sipping sweet water from carved crystal cups as the vizier watches them with narrowed eyes. "What are your names?" he asks softly. "Marwan," the boy replies, lifting his chin again. "And Soraya. And what brings you here?" They exchange a brief glance before Soraya speaks, her voice trembling but clear as she recites the gardener's last blessing. "We seek the truth of who we are." The vizier studies them in silence, drumming his thin fingers against his knee. Finally, he rises and sweeps from the chamber, robes whispering over the mosaic floor. Outside, doves coo in the palace garden, pecking fallen rose petals. The children sit quietly, the sweet date flesh melting upon their tongues, their golden curls luminous in the dappled courtyard light. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the turning of their fates. You muse, drifting above them like the warm breeze stirring jasmine vines. Some say the vizier left to scheme their doom. Others believe he went directly to the Sultan to speak of miracles returned from the river. But within their chests, the children's hearts beat with quiet certainty. For the first time, despite fear and hunger, they feel the world aligning around them, bending at last toward a truth that has waited years to rise. You remain with them in the receiving chamber, where filtered sunlight spills across the mosaic floor, illuminating tiny chips of turquoise and gold glass. Marwan and Soraya sit quietly upon their embroidered cushions, sipping sweet water and nibbling the last of the dates. The silence between them heavy with anticipation and fear. Beyond the carved cedar doors, footsteps echo down the marble halls. The vizier returns, his thin face unreadable as he gestures for them to rise. "Come," he says softly, though his eyes remain sharp and watchful. "The Sultan will see you now." Historians still argue whether he led them with kindness or hidden malice. Some claim he feared the exposure of his part in their abandonment years ago. Others say he wept in secret later. Moved by their courage and purity, they follow him through arched hallways inlaid with gold calligraphy, past incense burners exhaling curls of sandalwood smoke. Their bare feet whisper over cool marble, leaving faint prints behind them as they enter the grand throne room. The chamber is vast, domed with cobalt tiles that catch shafts of midday light, reflecting it in fractured brilliance across the room. Brass lanterns hang like silent suns, and beneath them, upon a wide dais of carved ebony, sits the Sultan. He is older now than the young ruler you glimpsed years ago in his chamber. His beard is streaked with silver, his broad shoulders still cloaked in sapphire robes embroidered with curling golden vines. He sits with quiet dignity, a tired sadness behind his dark eyes as he looks upon the two children brought before him. For a moment, the room holds its breath. Marwan lifts his chin, golden curls glowing in the lantern light. Soraya clasps her brother's hand, her pearl teeth flashing as she swallows her fear. The vizier bows low. "My lord," he says carefully, "these children came to your gates today. Their hair, their teeth." He gestures helplessly, words failing him. The Sultan's gaze sharpens as he studies them. His eyes flicker over their features, the tilt of Marwan's brow, the curve of Soraya's cheekbones, the golden hair tumbling to their waists like spun sunlight. "Who are you?" he asks, his voice deep but trembling with something old and wounded. Marwan takes a step forward. We do not know, my lord," he says softly. "We were raised by an old gardener by the river. He told us nothing, only that one day we would seek what was stolen." Soraya nods beside him. "We do not ask for riches," she whispers, tears brimming in her dark eyes. "Only to know who we are, and who our mother was." At these words, the Sultan flinches as if struck. The court murmurs around him, silks rustling, bronze jewelry clinking softly in the hushed tension. Historians still argue whether he recognized them instantly. Your thoughts whisper. Some chronicles say he knew at first glance that their faces mirrored their mother's beauty so perfectly it pierced his heart. Others claim he demanded proof, seeking omens from court astrologers before he believed. The vizier clears his throat nervously. "My lord, their hair is gold, their teeth like pearls, just as she said on the night they were born." Silence engulfs the throne room. The Sultan closes his eyes, grief rippling across his strong features. When he opens them again, tears glisten upon his lashes. "Bring her here," he commands hoarsely. At once, guards bow low, sandals slapping against marble as they rush from the hall. Minutes stretch into eternity before they return, leading a frail figure draped in coarse wool robes, her hair unbound and tangled like dark seaweed around her sunken face. The youngest sister walks unsteadily, shackled wrists clinking with each trembling step. Her eyes remain lowered until the guards release her chains, and she stands before the throne, silent and beaten, but still alive. She lifts her gaze, and the world holds its breath. Her eyes meet Marwan's first, then Soraya's. They widen in shock, her lips parting in a soundless gasp. Tears spill down her hollow cheeks as she reaches trembling hands towards them. "My sons! My daughter!" she whispers, voice cracking like parched earth in the summer sun. Marwan steps forward into her embrace, burying his face against her thin chest. Soraya clutches her arm, sobbing with a sound that shakes the silent court to its foundations. The Sultan watches them, tears running freely down his face now, his broad shoulders trembling with each ragged breath. Slowly, he rises from his throne and descends the dais. His robes whisper across the marble as he kneels before them, pressing his forehead to the cold floor at their feet. "Forgive me," he murmurs, his voice thick with sorrow. "Forgive me for my blindness, for my weakness, for believing lies over love." Historians still argue whether this act of humility was sincere or purely ceremonial. You reflect. Some versions praise his repentance as proof of his greatness. Others condemn him for cowardice, saying no apology could restore the years lost. But in that moment, beneath the vaulted cobalt dome, forgiveness and grief coil together like smoke rising from a dying brazier. The twins cling to their mother as she kisses their golden hair, and the Sultan weeps openly before his entire court. Outside, the afternoon sun blazes down upon the palace gardens, turning fountains into molten silver and setting rose petals ablaze with color. Doves take flight from the minarets, wheeling in silent spirals across the endless blue sky. And for the first time since their birth, the children of gold and pearl stand in the place they were meant to claim, not as lost river orphans, but as heirs to a kingdom built upon stories, secrets, and the silent, unbreakable bonds of blood. You remain kneeling beside them upon the polished marble floor, the scent of rosewater and sandalwood thick in the hushed throne room. The Sultan's tears splash against the tiles as he rises shakily to his feet, his sapphire robe brushing your senses like the rustle of night winds against desert dunes. He gestures to the guards with a trembling hand. "Take away her chains," he commands hoarsely. "Dress her in silks worthy of her place." The guards bow low, their bronze helmets flashing in the sunlight streaming through the high stained glass windows. With gentle hands, they unlock the iron shackles, letting them clatter to the marble like broken curses. The youngest sister gasps as blood returns to her wrists, her thin arms trembling with sudden freedom. Soraya clings to her mother's side, pressing her pearl-teeth smile against the woman's sleeve, tears wetting the coarse wool. Marwan stands tall beside her, his golden curls haloing his resolute face as he turns to the Sultan. "You believed lies," he says softly, no anger in his voice, only weary truth. "Will you make this right now?" Historians still argue whether the Sultan hesitated before nodding. Some say his pride flared one final time, then flickered out like a spent lamp. Others claim he fell to his knees again, overcome by guilt. He reaches out a trembling hand and places it upon Marwan's shoulder. "You are my son," he whispers, then turns to Soraya. "And you, my daughter, forgive my blindness. This kingdom is yours as much as mine." The vizier stands silent by the pillars, fingers twisting the heavy rings upon his bony hands. You watch his gaze dart between the children and the Sultan, thoughts whirling like startled birds trapped beneath a net. Some chronicles claim he plotted revenge that very moment. Others insist he repented, retiring to a quiet life of prayer far from palace intrigues. Servants hurry forward with fresh robes of embroidered silk and gold-threaded veils. They drape the youngest sister in a gown of deep blue, embroidered with curling pomegranate vines in silver and pearl. Attendants brush out her tangled hair until it falls in gleaming black waves to her waist. Kohl is lined around her hollow eyes, returning her the dignity stolen by years of grief. As for the twins, they are dressed in ceremonial robes, Marwan in ivory trimmed with turquoise and bronze, Soraya in flowing pale rose with a sash of amber silk. Their golden hair is braided and crowned with woven jasmine flowers that release sweet scent into the throne room's quiet. Historians still argue whether this crowning was immediate or held in secret days later. Your mind notes. Some tales say the Sultan summoned the entire city to witness the heirs reborn. Others claim he guarded them fiercely until enemies among the viziers and elders were rooted out. But what is certain is this. That evening, as sun melts into a river of molten copper behind the palace walls, Marwan and Soraya stand upon the marble balcony overlooking the royal gardens. Below them, fountains splash silver into lotus pools, and myna birds call softly from orange trees heavy with fruit. Their mother sits between them upon a carved sandalwood bench, her fingers entwined with theirs, eyes closed in silent gratitude. The Sultan stands behind her, one hand upon her shoulder, the other resting upon Marwan's head. Servants gather quietly around the gardens, lighting bronze oil lamps that flicker like captive stars in the violet dusk. Musicians begin to play gentle melodies upon ney flutes and qanun strings, their notes weaving through the jasmine-scented air like moonlight upon rippling water. Historians still argue whether the people accepted them instantly. You reflect as you drift above this glowing scene. Some say crowds wept with joy, seeing in the golden-haired children a living miracle. Others claim whispered doubts lingered for years, fading only when the twins grew to rule with wisdom and fierce mercy. Soraya tilts her head back, gazing up at the first stars trembling in the indigo sky. Marwan clasps the marble railing, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips, grounding himself to this moment he thought would never come. "Do you think he sees us?" Soraya asks softly, her voice barely louder than the breeze rustling the orange blossoms. "Who?" Marwan turns to her, frowning slightly. She smiles faintly, her pearl teeth flashing in the lamplight. "The old gardener." He pauses, eyes softening with grief and gratitude. "Yes," he whispers. "He sees. He always did." Their mother leans forward to kiss each of their foreheads, her lips lingering upon their skin as if memorizing the living warmth she had thought lost forever. The Sultan watches in silence, his eyes dark with tears unshed, guilt and hope warring within him. And beneath the violet sky, as the palace lamps burn like 1,000 tiny suns against the gathering darkness, you sense it clearly. Fate has begun to mend the torn tapestry of their lives, though threads of sorrow and gold will remain forever woven side by side. You remain with them upon the marble balcony as night deepens around the palace, its domes and courtyards glowing under countless bronze oil lamps. The air hums with quiet music drifting from the garden musicians, ney flutes weaving sorrow and hope into each rising note. Marwan stands beside Soraya, both dressed in their ceremonial robes, jasmine crowns glowing pale in the lantern light. Their mother sits between them, silent tears sliding down her cheeks as she gazes out over the kingdom that had cast her away, yet now returned her children. Inside the throne room, the vizier paces silently, his thin fingers tapping his lips. Historians still argue whether he plotted their destruction that night or accepted his fate. Some tales say he fled the city before dawn, fearing execution. Others claim he stayed and was later pardoned, living out his years as an advisor stripped of power but granted mercy by the young heirs he once wronged. As dawn breaks pale gold upon the horizon, the Sultan summons the royal court to the grand audience hall. He stands tall beneath the arched turquoise dome, robes of sapphire and gold pooling around his feet like a living river. "Bring my children forward," he commands. Marwan and Soraya step into the hall. barefoot upon the cold marble, golden hair spilling down their backs. The nobles stare with wide eyes as whispers ripple through the chamber like reeds shivering in river wind. "Children of gold and pearl," one court astrologer murmurs under his breath. Just as the prophecies foretold, the Sultan raises his hand for silence. His voice echoes through the cavernous hall, resonant with grief and newfound strength. "Years ago, I cast away what was dearest to me, blinded by lies and fear. Today, I reclaim them before the sun and sky. These are my true children, rightful heirs to this kingdom." Historians still argue whether the nobles bowed willingly or in silent fury at their diminished prospects. Some chronicles describe tearful acceptance, others silent oaths of future rebellion. The youngest sister stands at the dais' foot, clad in robes of deep indigo and silver. Her hair shines black as polished jet down her back, no longer tangled but combed smooth. Her eyes lined in kohl that emphasizes their deep almond shape. She lifts her gaze to meet the Sultan's. No hatred in her expression, only quiet sorrow and resolute dignity. He descends from his throne to stand before her, and in that hush, the entire court holds its breath. "Forgive me," he whispers, "for every hour stolen from you." She does not bow, but neither does she recoil. Instead, she rests her hand upon his cheek, thumb brushing away a tear before it falls. "You were a fool," she says softly, "but I forgive you, for their sake." He exhales a shaking breath, eyes closing against her touch. When he opens them again, he turns to the assembled nobles. "Let this day be recorded," he declares, voice rising like thunder rolling over distant dunes. "Let it be known throughout my lands that truth cannot remain buried forever." Marwan lifts his chin, his golden hair blazing in a shaft of dawn light streaming through the clear story windows. Soraya stands tall beside him, pearl teeth flashing as she smiles with fierce serenity. Historians still argue whether they were crowned that day. Your thoughts whisper as you watch the scene unfold. Some tales say formal coronation awaited their coming of age. Others insist golden circlets were placed upon their brows that very morning, woven with sapphires and tiny hammered suns. Regardless, by dusk, news of the children spreads like wildfire through the city streets. Water sellers shout the miracle as they splash cool water into brass bowls. Carpet merchants whisper it to distant buyers. Mothers braid their daughters' hair and murmur blessings for the golden-haired girl who would one day be queen. That evening, Marwan and Soraya sit upon the palace's highest terrace, eating sweet saffron rice with lamb and pomegranate seeds from carved wooden trays. Their mother sits between them, her laughter ringing softly for the first time in years. "Do you remember the mint garden?" Soraya asks, licking sticky pomegranate juice from her fingers. Marwan smiles faintly. "And the way the old gardener sang to the tamarisk trees before sunrise." Their mother looks between them, her eyes glistening. "Tell me everything," she whispers. "Tell me every moment I missed." And so they do, their voices mingling with the evening breeze, telling her of goat's milk breakfasts, woven reed mats by the river, lavender bracelets, and the secret wisdom of old herbs. They speak until stars spill across the indigo sky, until their words fade into drowsy murmurs, their heads resting upon her lap. Historians still argue whether peace lasted long after their return. You reflect quietly. Some chronicles speak of wars begun by jealous rivals. Others claim the kingdom prospered for decades under their united reign. But for now, upon the quiet terrace beneath the drifting scent of jasmine and warm night winds, there is only this: a mother reunited with her children, and two hearts once lost to the river finally finding their way home. You remain upon the high palace terrace with them, dawn's glow fading into the warm hush of night. Stars wheel silently above the city, each one trembling in the deep velvet sky like a tiny, distant lantern. Marwan and Soraya sleep with their heads resting upon their mother's lap, golden hair spilling across her silken robes. She strokes their curls softly, her fingers trembling with wonder and grief entwined. Below, the city hums with the lull of evening, the call to prayer echoing from minarets, the last market stalls folding their canopies, the river's quiet song threading through the shadows. The Sultan stands nearby, watching them in silence. His sapphire robe catches the lantern light, reflecting fleeting golden ripples across the terrace stones. He breathes deeply, as if every exhale might release a decade of regret from his tired chest. Historians still argue whether he ruled with renewed justice after their return. Some chronicles praise his final years as golden, tempered by humility. Others condemn his mercy as weakness that emboldened enemies at court. But here, in this quiet, he is only a father gazing upon the miracle of his children's survival. He kneels beside them, brushing his fingers against Marwan's cheek. "You will be a ruler of wisdom and unbreakable will," he whispers. Then he cups Soraya's small chin, smiling despite the tears brimming in his eyes. "And you will be the fierce moon that guides him." The children stir in their sleep but do not wake. Their mother looks up at the Sultan, eyes dark and unreadable. "I forgive you," she says quietly, her voice low as the night wind curling over the parapet. "But I will never forget." He bows his head in silent acceptance. As the moon rises, a slender arc of silver among drifting clouds, servants arrive with fresh linen blankets and brass braziers of glowing charcoal to warm the chill terrace air. The family remains there through the night, together for the first time since the children's birth. Historians still argue whether this peaceful night truly existed. Your mind whispers as you drift above them. Some versions claim it is legend, woven centuries later to soothe the sorrow of the tale. Others insist every moment is recorded in diaries, now crumbling to dust in forgotten palace archives. At dawn, the palace stirs to life once more. Peacock cries echo from the marble courtyards, and orange blossom petals fall silently into turquoise fountains. The children wake, blinking sleep from their eyes, smiles spreading across their faces as they see their mother's gentle gaze upon them. Marwan rises first, stretching strong limbs already showing the promise of the man he will become. Soraya rolls onto her back, laughing softly at the pale doves circling overhead. "Today," she whispers, her voice curling like sandalwood smoke into the warming dawn. "We begin everything again." Their mother rises with them, smoothing her indigo robes, hair flowing in black waves down her back. The Sultan offers his hand to her, and though she hesitates, she takes it in silence, her eyes locked upon his with quiet strength. They descend into the palace together as the sun rises, golden light flooding the hallways, where servants bow low, veils brushing polished tiles. Musicians begin their morning practice, delicate qanun strings echoing under the domes. Historians still argue whether the twins ever spoke of the river gardener again. You reflect softly. Some tales say they built a temple in his honor. Others claim they held his memory only in secret prayers whispered before sleep each night. But in this final morning light, you see their story clearly. Two children of gold and pearl, torn from truth, yet returned by fate's relentless weaving. A mother broken by grief, yet healed by reunion. and a kingdom once shadowed by lies now brightened by hope's quiet dawn. And so their story ends not with triumphant conquest or tragic despair, but with something far rarer, a sunrise that finds them together, awake, and finally at peace. Now, as you breathe slowly in your bed, let this story settle within you like cooling embers after a long night's fire. Picture the silent palace terrace, moonlight pooling upon marble, warm breezes drifting over sleeping hair, and quiet hearts. Imagine the scent of jasmine mingling with lantern smoke, and the hush of a kingdom holding its breath in the dark before dawn. In these final moments, let your mind soften around the golden curls of Marwan and Soraya, around their mother's tear-streaked smile and the Sultan's bowed head glinting beneath lamplight. Feel how grief and forgiveness can weave together into something calm and strong, like river reeds bending under water's gentle weight. Let your thoughts drift beyond the palace walls, down the winding moonlit roads, past the tamarisk groves and sleeping market stalls, to the quiet river gardens where it all began. Hear the reeds whispering in the breeze, the old gardener's soft song carried upon night winds, blessing every child who listens with hope. Even now, allow your breathing to slow, each inhale deep and steady, each exhale melting tension from your shoulders, your chest, your quiet mind. With each breath, imagine the sky darkening deeper into peaceful velvet, stars spinning slowly in their silent dance above you. Know that tomorrow will come, bright and new, and you will rise into it just as Marwan and Soraya rose into their morning, filled with quiet courage and unbreakable light. For now, let your body sink into stillness, your thoughts quiet as river stones beneath drifting water, and your heart soft as moonlit jasmine petals falling upon warm marble. Sleep well, dream gently, and wake ready to begin everything again.